And I think I got pretty lucky that way that, I've done a lot of different things. Um, and then I've been able to focus on one thing at a time while doing multiple things. While people think I'm doing multiple things, I'm really only concentrating on one thing at a time, and
Right.
then I move on to the next thing.
That's cool. So back to when you were 17, did you have any particular, you said your mom kind of made you be well-rounded, but did you have any particular careers outside of basketball that really interested you?
Not really. I thought I wanted to, maybe someday get into broadcasting, but I didn't know what that looked like when I was 17 or 18. But I took all sorts of different classes and as electives in high school. Like my mom insisted that I take public speaking courses and forensics, where you had to, like, I had to compete essentially compete in public speaking.
Wow.
And that was kind of nerve wracking. I didn't want to do it, and that was sort of the nerd path in my view. But I did it anyway, and I made a lot of great friends doing it. And as a result, after doing it, standing up before a judge in a courtroom, having to make an argument and think on your feet and be print and have a coherent presentation. So those are different. But as you point out, I mean, I think there is crossover to it. But a lot of people are frightened of public speaking, and it, because of the way I was brought up and educated in that field or that area, it has never bothered me. And it's not that I don't get nervous before I do something. I prepare myself and all that, but I've had so many different things come at me that I feel like I know how to handle it.
Gotcha. So, once you were at Duke, did you pick political science, forecasting that one day you may become a lawyer, or was that just something, again, that interested you at the time?
Yeah, it was just something at the time. If I had it to do over again and I knew I was going to get into broadcasting and I knew I was going to be a lawyer, I would have majored in English because the language is so important in all of my endeavors that I would have preferred to have spent more time in honing my writing skills and spending more time immersed in the language. I think that would have been more beneficial. Political science was great. I enjoyed it. It didn't bother me, but it's not like I wake up in the morning and I apply my political science skills to my job. It's certainly
Right.
nice to have, but unless I'm on Jeopardy, it's not going to do me a whole lot of good.
Gotcha. My English teacher's in here, by the way, so I think you just made a huge fan by saying that.
Yeah.
Um, so my next question is a little bit more broad about just the college experience. Clearly, with a rigorous major that you took and being at a major basketball D1 school, um, time must have been scarce. So for those future college athletes and quite frankly, just college people in college in general, how would you approach time management?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just sort of athletes that have to deal with that. Time management is important has been important in my life, period. And I think whether you have a job and balancing your work life and your home life, and when you have kids, all these different things, you're going to have to make those adjustments. And for me, it was an issue of concentration. Are you able to concentrate on what's in front of you and complete whatever task you have? And budget, like you said, budgeting your time to make sure this is how long this is going to take. And you're consistent in applying yourself to whatever task is in front of you. Most of it has to do with just buckling down and getting something done. Waking up in the morning, putting your feet on the floor, and saying, "These are the things I have to get accomplished," and that requires planning. And I was pretty good at that for the most part, but especially good. I did a much better job in college. I think the biggest thing that I think you have to deal with in managing time that people don't think about, and that is you have to get rest. And so if you feel like you're going to get something done by just working more hours in a day, I think that's a mistake, because you're not going to be at your best if you're not getting appropriate rest and taking care of yourself. So it's almost like when you're on an airplane and they say, when they're telling you about the oxygen mask, the first thing you do is put it on you, and then take care of yourself, and then you can take care of others and all that. I think it's a similar principle that if you want to if you want to accomplish more for yourself and others, you have to be at your best, and that means taking care of yourself first, and that means getting rest. And if you're not getting rest and eating right and doing all those things, then the amount of hours you apply, they're not going to be as productive, and ultimately there's going to be a breakdown at some point, and it's going to, I don't want to say all be for nothing, but you're going to have a negative result instead of a positive one.
Gotcha. That makes complete sense. So this is kind of bouncing off of that last thing too. After your playing days concluded, you stayed involved with both basketball as an assistant to Coach K, as well as getting your law degree. So obviously that required time management, and like you mentioned, not just in college. Did you stick with both paths to leave all options open, or did you just love both of those things?
Well, I went to law school because I thought it would be a great education for me and something that would give me a different way of thinking. And the great thing about law school is that it's a fabulous education, and you don't really have to be a lawyer to benefit from it. In my way of looking at it, if you go to medical school, you probably should be a doctor or a medical professional, because that's a lot of time to invest in something that you may not use. I think my legal education was really has been beneficial in every way for me, and I didn't necessarily have to be a lawyer in order to take advantage of it. But being able to do both, I thought I would stay in coaching, and that would be my life's work, that I'd stay in coaching, but it didn't work out that way for me. When I got married, my wife and I decided that coaching wasn't the best thing for our family life, so we decided to go in another direction. But law school and basketball, those were two essentially full-time jobs for me, and so the most important word in my existence for those 3 years was no. I had to say no to things so to be able to concentrate on what my priorities were. And sometimes that's what you have to do. In order to say, you're basically, by saying no to other things, you're saying yes to your priorities. So you basically have to understand what your priorities are first, and go through that calculus and say, okay, well, what's important to me? And then your decisions will certainly reveal what your priorities are. But you have to decide what those priorities are, and then put your energy and resources into your priorities first.
So you mentioned prioritizing what's important to you. Would you say for the, however many guys are in this room that are thinking about college and what they're going to do afterwards, is it better to focus on one thing that you work hard at, or like multiple things and leave a bunch of doors open, kind of like you did? Do you have like a strategy that you think works best, or is it just kind of case by case?
I think it depends on you, what you want, and your personality, and sort of what your personal makeup is. There's no right way to do anything. So I happen to believe that you're probably better off having a well-rounded education, a well-rounded view, trying different things. If your passion takes you to one thing to the exclusion of everything else, you don't have to worry about it. That's what you want to do if you want to be a basketball coach, maybe you're not going to do some of these other things because you really want to pour all your energy into that's your passion. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but I think especially when you're younger, you have to be open to trying a number of different things and educating yourself in a broad fashion, rather than just having one singular focus on something. Because at least in my experience, you don't really know what's out there for you when you're that age. And it's not a knock on being that age, it's just the way it is, and at least in my view. And I think you'll find, and you guys are going through something that none of us have had to deal with in our lifetimes right now with this pandemic, where it's basically turned your entire existence and your plan upside down, and you've got to adjust and adapt, which we didn't have to do. We're like, at my age, I've established my career, and it's being interrupted, but it's not being disrupted from the beginning like yours may be. But I think in a course of a normal life, you're going to have so many different things that you're going to do. When I was a kid, people, my parents and their friends, they may have worked in the same company for their entire careers and retired at the same place that they started. And that's not going to be the way your life is. That will be horribly unusual if that happens to you or someone you know. You
Right.
will probably have multiple different jobs and maybe even multiple careers, and you're going to have to adapt. And that's why being more well-rounded, to be able to adapt and move into another area, to have a well-rounded education and to continue with your education, it'll allow you to be able to pivot and adapt and jump into something else if a door gets closed in front of you.
Totally makes sense. So this next question is just kind of honing in on your time as a lawyer. What type of law did you practice, and can you give us a description of a typical day at Moore and Van Allen?
I was a commercial litigator, so I was basically a trial lawyer on the civil litigation side. So civil litigation means sort of business litigation. It's when one company would get in a dispute with another over money, essentially money or services. I did some limited criminal work, but it was on the pro bono side. The typical day for me, I was in the office at 6:30, 7 in the morning. And I had 20, at times 20 open cases where I would have to deal with those things. And it was just a question of timing and how the court's calendar and where the case was as to what took up most of my time in a given day. Sometimes I would work on multiple cases. Other times I would be preparing for a trial or depositions or whatever. And I would have one case that I'm dealing with for this time period. But that was several years ago. I don't really practice anymore. I'm still with my law firm, but I'm more in I'd say an advisory position now. My title is of counsel, so I help with recruiting, I help with business development, things like that. I'm not like sort of on the treadmill every day as a lawyer like I used to be, where you're
Right.
billing 3,000 hours a year. That was beyond a full-time job, and then I added broadcasting on top of it, so I was pretty busy.
Yeah, that's a lot. So now jumping into your broadcasting, that's a perfect transition. How did you eventually accept the job at ESPN? And I'm sure your day-to-day varies, but if you had to give kind of a broad description of what you do day to day, what would that be?
Uh, I started with ESPN in 1995, and I was practicing law at Moore and Van Allen, and I started doing radio and television games. And it got to the point where I'd done so much for ESPN. They reached out to me and said, we want you full time," and basically asked me to leave my law practice. And the offer was good enough where I said, okay, well, this would be a good career move. It certainly would be more fun than practicing law. So I took it, and I figured if I screw it up, if they fire me or I say something stupid and I'm gone, all I have to do is hang a shingle out again, and I can restart my law career. That my law degree and my license to practice have been a very nice sort of safety net, if you will. It's given me it's certainly given me the ability to say no. I don't have to be a broadcaster. I can be a lawyer again tomorrow if I want to. I don't really, I enjoy what I'm doing now, so I'm not asking to do that. But it gave me a lot of freedom and has given me a lot of freedom. So I've been with ESPN full time, signed a long-term contract, and I've been, re-signing from periodically. So I've been there the last, I don't know, 20 years or so full time. So it's been a pretty good gig for me.
That's fantastic. So I gotta ask, on just behalf of everyone in here, I've been to a few game days in Chapel Hill for the Duke game. What is your favorite location to do game day other than Cameron? Because you have ties there, obviously.
My favorite is probably Allen Fieldhouse. I mean, I like going to North Carolina because I can drive there. I can get home to Charlotte right after the game on Saturday night. But the best venue for us has been Allen Fieldhouse over the years, just because of the setting. It's such a great place, and then the crowd is always, I don't know what it is about that place. It's just the tradition, the history. It's special, but there's not been anywhere I've been or we've been that we haven't really enjoyed. Like this last year, we were at Dayton for the final game day. It was basically right before they wound up pulling the plug on the season. And that was fantastic. So it just depends on the time of year, the kind of year that particular program is having, and then the setting.
And I apologize because I'm sure you've heard this question a million times too, but favorite game you've ever called? Is there one that sticks out?
For most people, the one that resonates is the I did a 6 overtime game
Holy
between
cow.
Syracuse and UConn in the Big East tournament years ago. So that was one people tend to remember the most. And then I did an NCAA tournament game, an Elite Eight game. Winner goes to the Final Four between. It was in 2005 between Illinois and Arizona. That was an overtime game with an extraordinary comeback by Illinois. So a lot of people remember that game too. Those two would probably stick out.
That's great. So now just jumping back, I know one of the things you're most passionate about is the compensation of student athletes. Does your knowledge of the law help you defend your argument? Or is this just something that did your experience as a student athlete make you passionate about this topic, or is it just something that's developed over time?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, I was on an NCAA committee when I was in college, so I became a policy wonk back then and learned how the system worked, and I didn't think it was particularly fair. And I didn't think what the NCAA machine was saying publicly was honestly it was true. I didn't think it was true. And but at the time, I was in the gears of the machine, so I had to, even though I was pretty vocal in our committee meetings about the changes I felt should be made or the things that should be dealt with the transfer policy and other things. When I got out in public, I towed the company line and just sort of said what was expected to be said. But now that I cover I cover NCAA policy and NCAA sports and all that, I feel like I have to state sort of the way I believe things to be. And so while some say I'm an advocate. When I agree with the NCAA, I say so. When I don't, I say so. That's basically all it is. But you can't look at this in my view, you can't look at this multi-billion-dollar industry and somehow say this is amateur sports. Amateur sports don't make billions of dollars. That's not the.
Right.
It's wrong. It's pro.
It makes total sense. And my last question for you today, and hopefully we'll have time for one or two Q&As, but I know you have a son and a daughter that are both a little bit older than us. When they were in high school, what type of advice were you giving them about their careers, since you've set the bar so high as a man that holds two jobs at all times or has held two jobs at all times?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know that we really emphasized anything other than pick something, whatever you decide to do it as well as you can, and then concentrate on what's in front of you. And then when that's over, move on to the next thing. Like both of our kids, we got a girl, 25-year-old girl, and a 25-year-old daughter, I should say, she's a woman, and then a 23-year-old son. Both of them are out in the working world, and they're both doing what they want to do right now. And hopefully that'll continue. I'm sure they're feeling a little bit uneasy about whether their jobs are going to continue if this COVID-19 thing continues to go the way it appears to be going. There's going to be even more disruption than there's been. But they've been very smart about how I think they've handled things, and they've. I think one of the things my wife and I tried to help them with is, you want to do the best you can in school and pay very good attention to sort of the opportunities that you have, but once something's done and over with, let it go and move on to the next thing. Like, don't beat yourself. If you get a result that you don't care for, analyze it and decide. You can be disappointed, but you got to pick yourself up and move on at some point. And at the same time, if you kill it in one thing and you get the best grade ever, you can't sort of rest on that. You have to move on to the next thing. And they're both pretty good at that.
That's great. All right, that's all I have. Do you think you have time for two or three Q&As?
Yeah, whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere.
Perfect. So I want to open the first one up to Joe Brennan, because we actually have a sports information department here at St. Chris, and we have guys that commentate the basketball and all the athletic games, and Joe is like a star in that industry. So I want to give him the first question of the day. So Joe, take it away.
I want to know what advice you would have for someone trying to get into the sports media industry.
Well, the first thing is I wouldn't necessarily look at it as sports media. I would just look at it as media. Period. Like sports is your interest, but you have to have certain skills in order to be good at all of this. And whether you decide if you decide to get into media, are you talking about in front of or behind the camera, or in front of behind the microphone?
Typically in front of, but I'm also looking into some production behind.
So if you're going to do on-air stuff, you have to hone skills, the skills that are required for that. But it really doesn't. The sports side of it doesn't matter. The really good ones or the great ones are able to function because they have the requisite technical skills to be able to do it. And that includes your knowledge, your mind. You have to be an expert in the field, in whatever field you're dealing with. And then I think you have to have the humility to prepare, sort of the humility to prepare, and then the confidence to carry it off. That's really important. But also, like it happens in the law, like sort of the idea that when some people say, well, I'd like to be a sports lawyer. Well, no, you better just be a good lawyer, and then a good lawyer can operate in any area of practice. So you may have an ultimate goal of operating in a certain area, but you're going to have to do all kinds of things if you're going to get into the media. And you may have to pivot and do something else. And the other part of it is like on the production side, a lot of it's going to depend on your ability to learn. Have you learned how to learn? Because the technology is changing all the time. So if you learn to do, sort of behind the camera work in the truck for live production, you were working on, they used to call it Chiron, it did graphics and all that stuff. That doesn't even exist anymore. Everything changes, and so you're gonna have to be able to adapt and continue to stay on top of things and continue to learn.
All right, so the way I think we're going to do this is I'll take one more with the hand raise, and then if you have a question, just send it in a personal chat to me, and I'll ask a few before we let Mr. Bilas go. So anybody have another question right now that you want to just raise your hand? Yeah, Curtis, go.
Before kind of a normal game, say you're covering like a UVA versus UNC game, how many hours would you say you prepare beforehand?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that because I'm preparing essentially all the time. I cover so many games and so many different things. I'm constantly watching film and preparing. But generally, if I have a game coming up between like North Carolina and Virginia, I will watch, usually if several days before, I'll watch a lot of film of each team. And so I'll watch several of their games, and then I'll go and watch them practice. I try to get in to the venue at least 24 hours before the game, but oftentimes it's more than that the day before, so I can go to practice, and then I go to both game day shoot-arounds, and then I wind up talking to coaches that have played those teams recently just to find out, hey, what did they do against you? What was difficult for you to prepare for? Things like that. And then, I prepare scouting reports for both teams. And so I have those with me when I'm on the air. I don't really consult them all that much because putting them together usually gets the information I need in this little pea brain of mine. And then I'm able, by being as fully prepared as I can be, that allows me to just react to what I see on the floor and pivot. So that's basically the way I do it. Some people do it differently, but I take a lot of pride in the preparation that I put in. That doesn't mean just because you prepare doesn't mean you're going to perform at a high level. But if you don't prepare, you can pretty much guarantee you won't.
Okay, thank you.
Nikos, go ahead.
So when you were at Duke, how big was watching film for your team pretty much, and like how did that kind of help you in watching film like for broadcasting?
Well, there are a couple different things. When you're a player, we watched a lot of film when I was a player, and it was really, really beneficial because you may have a certain thought about what had happened in a game or a practice that you may be watching back. And then when you see it and see yourself and see your team, it may look different on film. Everybody says the film doesn't lie, and that's true. But I think you have to be, when you're watching film, you have to be very analytical about it. And so we used a lot of film. I watch film differently now as a broadcaster than I did as a competitor. Now, when I'm watching a team, going back to the example about North Carolina and Virginia, I'm less watching about, well, how do we stop Virginia, or how do we stop North Carolina, or how do we score against them? And you're watching it to be able to appreciate what each team does and be able to point it out in the broadcast to where it makes the broadcast more enjoyable for the viewer. And then that you're able to spot and inform the viewer about, well, here's the adjustment that North Carolina is making. Here's what North Carolina is trying to do against Virginia, and Virginia's trying to do against North Carolina. Things like that. So it's a little bit of a different, different reason that you're watching the film, and that took a little bit of time for me to flip the switch on. I don't have to sit and worry about where are we going to double team the post here to make sure, or how are we going to handle this post to post double team. It's not my concern. That's the competitor's concern. It's my concern to be able to point it out so that you can help the viewer enjoy the game.
I just got a question in my chat asking, what advice would you have for anyone who is in the college search process, and how you knew Duke was the right school for you?
Yeah, mine may be a little bit different just because I was recruited there. So I was choosing among colleges that were saying, please come here. And that's a luxury that I probably didn't appreciate as much as I should have. But it was that's a very nice way to be able to go through the process. So I'm probably not the best person to ask this question, but after having two kids go through the college process, one of the things that struck me was I didn't realize how stressful it is. It's a stressful period, and you feel like your value is being gauged, and somehow the college you get it, you get accepted to or get rejected by, somehow that reflects upon you in some way, and it really doesn't. One of the things I told my son when he was going through this, I kind of sat him down and I said, hey, let's look at all the sort of the top earning CEOs in Fortune 500 companies, and see if you can spot any pattern as to where they went to school. And the truth is, you couldn't spot any pattern to it at all. Some of them went to these tiny little Division III colleges. Others went to, there's maybe one went to Harvard, somebody went to North Carolina, somebody went here, went there. There was nothing to it. And it really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter where you go, because it's nice for you to be able to go where you choose and you like. That's a nice thing. But ultimately, where you go to school is not going to determine the trajectory of your career or your life. You're going to determine that, and how you deal with all that. That's going to determine where you are. So I wouldn't. You have things you want to pursue, and that's great. But wherever you decide to go, you can only choose one. So who cares about the other stuff? Once you choose a place, throw everything you have into it and go for it without a rearview mirror.
All right, we're going to take one more question. Who is the greatest, in your time as a broadcaster, who is the greatest college basketball player you've ever watched?
Wow, the greatest. Well, I mean, the best high school player was LeBron James. I did his games in high school. Even though he wasn't around very long, Kevin Durant was awfully good. So he was probably the best that I saw. But there are so many great ones. It's hard to even, like Chris Paul. I covered Chris Paul's games and all that stuff. So there've been so many, like, heck, the people I covered now when I first started, they're retiring now and approaching the Hall of Fame induction and stuff. So I'm getting older, so it's hard to call them out.
All right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so, so much for joining us. We are all so grateful. This has literally made my entire year that you joined the club for this meeting. And I know everybody in this chat is super grateful too. So thank you so much for your time, and stay safe during the virus.
You too. Thanks for having me, everybody, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
You too. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Bilas.
Thank you.
Thank you.